what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Making the Game from Concept to Crowdfunding. I'm your host, Reece, and it's been a while, but I've been super busy managing production of the game. We are currently done with manufacturing the core box. We had to slow down a little bit to do some quality upgrades on the hero expansion, so currently we're waiting on that to get done. I was hoping we would be fulfilling this month, but clearly not going to be doing that because we are still manufacturing the hero expansion, but everything is looking really good. And so for an update there, the core box components are all done. We had to do some adjustments to the Ghorgantus expansion because the model is so big. We had to fidget around with the box a few times, but that is now done. And currently we're just manufacturing the hero expansion products. We had to wrestle with some of the boards to make sure all the text and everything fit, but that is in production now. I'm going to be doing a weekly update again. I took a break from that to catch up on like family life and all that other sort of stuff. Speaking of which, I have an exciting announcement I'll be making really soon for my personal life, but currently we're just waiting to finish the hero expansion manufacturing, and I'll be giving an update with pictures every week so everybody can see where that's at. Please, if you haven't already done so, go in and make sure that your address is correct. I had a few people that emailed me. I'm going to update that tomorrow for anybody that needed an updated address for whatever reason. So please make sure you do that. And then I'm going to start getting the freight lined up to get the shipment over to our warehouse in Vegas, from which we will then fulfill. Also exciting, we found a distribution partner in Russia. So we aren't going to put it into Cyrillic or Russian language yet, just because it's so much text. But for anyone out there that may apply to, there is a reseller that will be selling in Russia. So I'll have more information for that when the time comes. Due to the way the factory works, they won't box everything up until it's all done, and they do this to save room in the warehouse, because when everything is just in components, which you'll be seeing some pictures if you're watching the video, it's more space efficient. So where we're at right now is they'll finish manufacturing the hero expansion components, and then they will put everything, they'll assemble all the boxes, put everything in the boxes, then goes into cartons, then into the shipping container, and then it'll be over to the United States. So I'll keep everybody updated as we go there. But we're at the tail end of the manufacturing process. It just, as the theme of this project has been, took longer than initially quoted. The factory initially told me it would be 30 days to completion for manufacturing, but it has taken longer just because we had to make some adjustments at the last minute. Which, you know, it's better to do that than to send out something where like you couldn't read some of the text, or, you know, one of the images was messed up or what have you. So we're going to dive back into our in-depth series, and this week we're going to be talking about the monk. So the monk is my, you know, I'll show my bias here. It's my favorite RPG class. It's not one of like the more quintessential classes, like, you know, the holy trinity of the rogue, wizard, and warrior. But for, you know, maybe I watched too much Dragon Ball Z as a kid or whatever. The idea of a regular Joe that just does a bunch of push-ups and meditates and then goes, you know what? I'm going to go into a dungeon and start punching monsters in the face. It's just like, that's pretty awesome. It's like, that is the ultimate flex when you're willing, when your confidence level is so high that you're willing to just go in and box and throw hands with some monsters. So I always, for whatever reason, I was always just really drawn to it. And it's, you know, whenever I play an RPG, when the monk is the option, that's usually my first choice. Almost always is my first choice. So I came into it wanting to reflect the class as well as I could, because playing it in other RPGs, like, some of them get it right, like Diablo, I always felt like did a really good job. One of my favorite CRPGs, Pillars of Eternity, I thought did a really good job with the monk. But in pen and paper RPGs, they often feel kind of underwhelming. Pathfinder and D&D, particularly older editions of it, they always kind of like felt lackluster as a martial class. And then they had so they like kind of dabbled into like magical areas, like whether it be like chi or whatever MacGuffin they used to explain it. And I always was kind of like, eh. In my mind, the monk was always more of a martial class that had like magical elements to it to make it feel unique, like almost more of a spellblade type of a concept. And that they should have, in my opinion, overwhelming offense against the right target and be very mobile. And then again, you sprinkle in some metaphysical abilities and attributes into it to make it feel unique and exciting, and to have the opportunity to mix in some of the more supernatural elements into it. So that was sort of where we started with it, and wanted to build from there. So in Bloodthrone, a monk is kind of a combination of a martial artist and a spiritual ascetic, meaning that they, forego material wealth and they spend their time honing their mind, their body, and their spirit. And in so doing, again, because in Bloodthrone, in the Bloodthrone universe, heroes are individuals that are able to tap into the metaphysical or the spiritual realm, and they're able to use that energy to do amazing things. So the monk is, on top of being an incredibly disciplined and talented athlete, they're also in touch with that metaphysical realm, and so they're able to draw on that energy. Whereas a warlock, which is the last class that we covered, is able to do that by making a pact with a being from the metaphysical realm. The monk does it through looking inward, meditating, and developing that ability through discipline, which I thought makes them rather unique. They're not necessarily special, they're just super duper focused, right? Like they will themselves into becoming a superhuman, which I think is really cool. So they master multiple fighting styles, and that's reflected in the game mechanics to let them do a lot of different things. It makes them very versatile. It's a high skill cap class, and they fall firmly into the mobility striker archetype, which I've discussed. Like the warlock falls into that category, so does the rogue. And these classes are like glass cannons, so to speak. Like their potential for destruction is incredibly high, but they're very fragile. So you have to play them really intelligently. So that's why I say these are high skill cap classes. Whereas like whenever we have a new player that comes to play the game, I always recommend them the fighter or the ranger, because they're really, really straightforward. This doesn't mean there isn't nuance to playing those classes. There is. It just means that they're more straightforward, right? Like the fighter is hard to kill, hits hard, go right forward, try to get stuck on as many enemies as possible. The ranger runs around shooting you, and he's also good at melee. And in the hero expansion, he can summon a wolf. So it's just like, they're just really intuitively easy to play. Whereas a class like the monk or the warlock or the rogue, if you don't play them correctly, they will get taken off the board really quickly. But if you do figure out how to play them, they can be one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, classes on the board. So really rewards a player who enjoys playing them. So what makes the monk unique compared to those classes is their Fist of Fury ability, which is their quintessential ability, and I'll dive more into the mechanics when we get into the class skills. But basically, which it's pretty common in a lot of RPGs, they get more attacks, and that's sort of what makes them special. So the monk has a lot of middle damage attacks, making them extremely deadly to support heroes and monsters that don't have a lot of armor. But the monk will really struggle to fight like a fighter or a dark knight. That's not an opponent they want to mess with, because they're going to struggle to hurt them. And then the monk also manifests their spiritual abilities by being able to like shoot a fireball, which had to be done. And then they can even fly for limited periods of time. They're very acrobatic, so they're extremely mobile. So again, it's one of these classes that you need to have a plan for them. Like they're definitely a more of a big brain class, but they reward that style of play. So in short, if you can mitigate their relative fragility, like they're not as squishy as a spellcaster, and the monk is definitely more durable than the warlock or the rogue. The rogue is like the most extreme all-out offense. Although you actually can build a fairly tanky rogue if you want to. The monk has some inbuilt abilities to make them more tanky than either of those classes, but they're still in what I would call the glass cannon category. So the monk has the most severe equipment restrictions in the game. This is kind of typical to the monk archetype. Traditionally they're represented as like a Shaolin style monk. No armor, no weapons. But, if you think about more broadly, like the martial artist, um, you know, Buddhist style monk or if any of the traditions in Earth history, they often will have like a bow staff, or you can even have nunchucks or something similar to that. And we decided to put in a little bit of flexibility, so the monk can go up to light armor. So if you had an idea in your mind for like a really cool looking monk that had like a bow, quarterstaff with like some kind of leather armor, you could do that. And in playtesting, we tried that; it works quite well. But if you want to go for the traditional monk, which the Kechiwayo, the monk in the box, he is built in the more traditional loadout, which is no armor, no weapons. He's just using his fists and relies on not getting hit or blocking attacks in order to avoid damage. So the monk also has access to a class-specific weapon, which they default to having these weapons. They're the monk fist. So normally, any hero that is unarmed will have a fist as a weapon. You have to equip a weapon in both your slots, and the fist has no encumbrance. And it's like the default slot. Like a lot of heroes who have a two-handed weapon will have a fist in the other slot just because you have to have something. And obviously, you would have a hand. So normally an unarmed attack is not very good, as one would assume. It's damage 2. And it has the natural weapon keyword, which if you have two identical weapons with the natural weapon keyword, you get dual wield for free. So the monk gets that. So the monk automatically has dual wield, and with their Fist of Fury class ability, they get 3 attacks. That's what makes them unique. And again, that's pretty normal in any, RPG, CRPG, where the monk is just attacking very quickly. So the difference, though, is that monk fists are damage 3, which is the equivalent of like a dagger or any light weapon. And they have the defensive keyword, which is really critical. So the defensive keyword, whenever you see that, the quarterstaff also has that. So the monk's other weapon choice also has the defensive keyword. What this does is it allows you to parry on attack action for free, meaning you don't gain the disarm keyword. The disarm keyword means you cannot attack with that weapon in your next activation. If you have that status effect. So the defensive keyword lets you block 1 attack for free, basically. And since the monk has 2, they can block 2 attacks for free per activation. But then you could parry on top of that if you needed to. So this lets, and in playtesting, it was really hard to get the monk right, whereas the rogue was the easiest class we got. I feel like we got it on our first try. The monk was really hard to get right because the offense felt right. They are really good against low armor opponents, but they were really, really squishy. So we really were just like trying to find a way to make them stick around a little bit longer. And we felt like after a lot of different iterations, we found this to be really effective. So in melee, they can block 2 attacks for free, which roughly reduces the amount of damage you're going to take by 50%. So that really helped the monk to stick around longer. And it ended up making them, of all the mobility style classes, it made them one of the more durable ones, which is a nice differentiation in the way they play. So again, their class ability, meaning they automatically put this card in their deck. It's the quintessential ability of the class. is Fist of Fury. And this one is unique in that it can be used any number of times. It's like all other special actions, almost all other special actions, it's not once per activation. So typically you're only going to be able to attack twice, but there is ways to attack up to 3 times if you find all the combos. But this means that pretty much every time the monk attacks, unless it specifically says they may not use this, like with Dragon Kick, they will get an extra attack. So even if they use a special attack, or if they're equipped with a weapon, they still get to make an extra attack action roll. And this is a 3 damage attack. So it's meant to represent that they're kicking, headbutting, throwing elbows, knees, all this sort of fun stuff to cinematically represent a monk attacking with their whole body. So what in effect, what it means is if you have a monk like the one in the box, they're going to have 3 attack action rolls when they attack, which is crazy. It means that they'll almost never miss because when you're attacking 3 times, at least one of them is probably going to hit. And it means, again, when you're attacking like a spellcaster or a support hero or monster or a low armor monster, you're going to do a lot of damage. So if you hit with all 3, you're throwing 9 dice plus power, and Kechiwayo has 3 power. So if you hit with all 3, that's 12 dice. That's crazy, right? But the way damage reduction or armor works in Bloodthrone is you apply the damage reduction to every successful action roll. And we did this to mitigate how powerful multiple attacks are. So for example, if you were attacking a target that had medium armor, which is damage reduction 2, and you hit with all 3 attacks, you would be subtracting 6 dice from the damage dice pool. So in the example we just used with Kechiwayo attacking with 3 attacks and power 3, if all of them hit, he would go from 12 dice to 6. So it's damage reduction is multiplicatively effective against multiple attacks. And then if you were attacking someone with heavy armor like the Dark Knight or the Fighter or the Paladin, you would subtract 9 dice because heavy armor is damage reduction 3. So you would go from 12 down to 3. So as you can see, the monk doesn't really want to fight people that have high armor because their damage just gets reduced so dramatically. And similarly, if you have someone that has armor and a shield, the monk is going to struggle. So they're not designed to attack those types of models. They're designed to go clear out the backfield. And if you can pull that off, they're devastating. And if you can't, you'll often find that they're not going to do a whole lot. And now to mitigate that scenario I just described, there's a feat that upgrades Fist of Fury that is called Scorpion Strike. And what this does is it replaces the damage dice for Fist of Fury, which is 3, with raw dice. Raw dice do more damage and they bypass armor and they can't be blocked or parried usually unless somebody has some magical ability. So then it turns your extra attack into a missile, basically, so that you can punch through armor. And it really helps to offset the damage reduction penalty that is the monk's worst enemy. So the monk's primary skill tree is mobility, and while they only have 1 class skill in this, it's kind of baked into the overall way that you can play the monk through their feats and a lot of their other abilities that are available to them. So much like the rogue, their primary ability that differentiates them from all other classes is their ability to move freely around the tabletop and ignore some of the core rules that limit the mobility of pretty much any other monster or hero. So at level 1, you get acrobatic, or you may select acrobatic in your deck. And this is very similar to dash from the rogue, but it is better. So like dash, it lets you make a move action ignoring attacks of engagement or attacks of opportunity. So normally, if you leave another model's engagement, an enemy model's engagement, they get a free strike on you. This lets you move ignoring that. And additionally, to represent how acrobatic and athletic the monk is, you can also ignore terrain when you move. So you could like move over a wall without having to take the movement penalty, jump over a building. Like, it's really cool, right? It's supposed to be like, hidden dragon flying Hidden Tiger, Flying Dragon. I'm sure I said that incorrectly. But just imagine any of the cool kung fu movies you've seen where the martial artists are like, quasi flying around the place. That's what it's meant to represent. So it allows the monk to be extremely, extremely mobile. Normally, intervening models are going to be the biggest inhibitor and terrain to where a model can move. And the monk, with this skill, can bypass that. And then they can also upgrade this skill with a feat called Acrobatic Charge, which allows them to make a charge action with this skill, which is pretty crazy because normally if a model is engaged by an enemy, they cannot declare a charge action. Acrobatic Charge allows them to charge even if they are engaged. So you could charge, someone could be tagging you in combat, think you're pinned down. You could charge through them over a wall into a wizard in the back and then just pummel them with a Fist of Fury attack. So this is just the tip of the iceberg too. As we go through this breakdown, you'll be able to see all the other ways you can make a monk the most mobile, potentially the most mobile character or hero in the game. So the monk's secondary skill tree is striking or DPS. And they have a ton of abilities in this to allow them to do all kinds of different damage to different targets. So we'll dive in. At level 1, they have access to Mantis Stance, and this is a really powerful class skill that you're going to put in your deck very frequently. What it is, it's a reactive action, meaning you use it in another model's activation, so it doesn't take up any of your actions. Reactive actions are always good just for that purpose. But it's after you make a parry action, you can make a free attack action with disadvantage and attack whoever it was you just parried. So not only are you reducing the amount of damage that you're taking, you're punching them back. So a great ability, doesn't require a lot of explanation, and it helps to ratchet up the offensive capability of the monk and just to continually be putting out DPS. At level 2, you can take Dragon Kick. Dragon Kick was a skill that we put in specifically to let the monk deal with higher armor targets, but it has a lot of uses. So what it is a charge action at reach range. So again, reach is an extra square of range orthogonally, meaning directly forward, backwards, left, and right. And what it does is instead of doing 2 damage 3 attacks with their fists, it's 1 damage 6 attack. And so why this is important is because the way armor works, as I explained, it's applied to every successful attack. So if you were to attack a model with medium armor and you hit with 2 damage 3 attacks, instead of being reduced 4 damage reduction, 1 for each successful attack, you'd only be reduced by 2. So it would double the amount of damage that you would do. And then of course you're adding in power. And it's reach range on the charge, and when you charge, you get a bonus damage die. So it lets a monk go do a flying Bruce Lee style kick, which is cool unto itself, hit a higher armor target and not have so much dice removed. But on top of this, it also pushes the target 2 movement points of movement, which would be 2 squares in a line or 1 diagonally after you hit them. So what this does is, for one, if you're going to go drop kick a fighter in the face, it'll push them back so that you're not stuck in combat with them. Or you could use it to get a opposing model off of one of your models. So if you have a priest or whatever that's stuck in combat with the Dark Knight and you don't want them to be there, the monk can just go do a Bruce Lee dragon kick, blast them, push them back off of your ally. Or if you really want to get cinematic with it, you could kick someone and potentially dock them off of a building or a tower where they then fall and take damage. So it's a really versatile skill. It's not one that you're going to use, every activation, but when you need it, you're going to be really glad that you had it in your deck. So at level 6, the monk can take Hadouken. Yes, I played Street Fighter. I feel like this had to be done. It's just too fun. Very frequently at level 6, we give martial characters the option for a ranged attack. Like the fighter can throw a shield, the rogue can throw daggers, And similarly, the monk can shoot a fireball, which is just cool. And it does 3 raw damage, so it's quite powerful. And it's medium range, so it bypasses armor. Again, it's just a really useful ability to have in your deck. And the monk's already incredibly quick, so you could come up around a flank and then, Hadouken someone and blast them from quite a ways away. At level 8, the monk gets 5-finger death punch, and yes, I was laughing to myself while I was writing the names of these abilities. Whether you enjoy movie Kill Bill or metal music, you'll probably get the reference. But we decided to include in each faction one to two, usually one of these abilities. 1 to 2 typically of these abilities that you can one-shot, one-kill an opposing model. So obviously these are once per game because they're so good. And for the monk, it's a melee attack. Targets will, which is really important because martial monsters and heroes usually have low will. It's usually their weakest defense. And as a quick reminder, you have evasion, which is your all-purpose defense. It's like armor class. And then you have fortitude and will, which are your defenses against special attacks like spells or what have you. And these are to balance out evasion. So typically a martial class will have low will, and the monk, if successfully hits with this attack, it just immediately takes the model off the board. Against monsters, this is obviously amazingly good in PvP as well. But just to put it out there, higher like boss monsters often have a protection against being insta-gibbed. Just so that, when you come up against a big giant boss monster, you don't just one-shot them, which would, obviously be rather anticlimactic. But this is an amazing ability once per game, and then obviously in PvP, you're going to want to try and deny or dispel an ability like this. Finally, at level 10, the monk gets their ultimate ability. As a quick reminder, ultimate skills are automatically put into your deck. It doesn't take up one of your class skill choices. And like all ultimate abilities, the monk's is very good. It's called Transcendent Spirit. Unlike most ultimate abilities, this one is once per game, as they all are. This one is a blessing that the monk puts on themselves. So what that means is it's a game-long buff until it is removed. So that makes it a little different. Then most of the other ones are like a super attack or something of this effect. This gives the monk the fly keyword, and then they add +1 raw damage dice to their Fist of Fury attack. So potentially it could be doing 4 red dice per attack if you took the other upgrade. And then the fly keyword does exactly what you think it would. It lets you move over things without impediment, right? So it makes the monk turbo mega mobile, right? So as I was saying at the beginning, there's a lot of the mobility tricks that are built into other things, and that will become apparent as we go. The monk's tertiary skill tree is in applying status effects. It felt appropriate to, anybody who watches Kung Fu movies. And this allows the monk to debilitate foes with special, secret martial arts techniques. At level 1, the monk can take Tiger Claw. So this is a 3 damage attack, which you can also use Fist of Fury with. So it would be 2 3 damage attacks, but it also, if it hits, it blinds and silences the target. And what that means is the target model will have an accuracy in metaphysics of 0 that cannot be increased. It's a 1-turn duration. It's called an affliction. So what this does, it's really, really useful for the monk if they're going to go attack a really powerful boss, like a mini boss monster or a powerful hero, that they're not going to just take him out in one attack. Or a powerful spellcaster that they're not going to just one-shot. And it dramatically reduces the target model's ability to cast spells or to attack. So accuracy affects physical attacks, metaphysics attacks affects metaphysical actions. So it's a really, really powerful debuff. And if you can get the monk stuck on like a boss spellcaster and they just keep doing this, it'll make it so that the monster it's really difficult for them to actually cast any spells. And then finally at level 4, the monk gains Paralyzing Palm. And this gives them the Paralyze status effect. Again, every faction will have probably a handful of ways to do this because Paralyze is really strong and you don't want to have the opportunity to spam it. And as with all Paralyze effects, it's once per game. So if the monk successfully hits them with the Paralyzing Palm at target's will, that target then basically loses an activation. So when the target next activates, they can't do any actions. So it's extremely strong. And again, you use this on a target that the monk isn't just going to blast in one shot, right? Like an opposing tank or mini boss monster or something to that effect. So the monk has some really, really strong feats, and we decided to get pretty creative with the monk's feats due to the fact that they have so many equipment restrictions. So we wanted to build in the opportunity for the player to make a monk that was more tanky or even more offensive, or even faster, right? So this is kind of where the magic is, so to speak, for this class. At level 2, they can take accurate blows, which increases their accuracy by +1. Now that one's not very creative. A lot of classes get that one. But again, for the monk, since pretty much all of their abilities use accuracy and then their physical attacks use accuracy, this is a really big increase to their efficacy and their offensive output. Or they can take arrow catching. Again, these are both at level 2 with feats. You pick one and it's permanent. Arrow catching allows them to parry ranged attacks, including metaphysical ranged attacks that don't deal raw damage. So like, a spell that does normal damage, the monk can block it, or they can grab an arrow out of the sky, or they can even deflect a bullet from a black powder rifle, for example. So the reason why this is so good for the monk is that all their weapons have the defensive keyword, so they can parry for free. So again, if you want to just have a more reliable monk at dealing damage and applying status effects, you want to go with accuracy. If you want a monk that's more defensive and that can block ranged attacks, arrow catching is a really, really good option. At level 4, the monk can choose either Falcon Swiftness, which gives them +1 movement points, or Falcon Strike. Apparently I was really focused on Falcon for this one. It's funny, I didn't catch that I repeated that until later, but it's okay. Cool, both cool names. And Falcon Strikes gives the reach range to their monk fists. So both of these are extremely good. And Falcon Swiftness is unique in that at level 3, there's a general feat called Long Stride that's available to all classes in the game. It gives you +1 movement. It's one of the most frequently chosen feats in playtesting because movement is just so powerful. So for the monk, this allows you to either not take Long Stride because all the level 3 general feat choices are really, really good, or you can double down and take both and potentially make the fastest character in the game, the fastest hero or model in the game. So for example, if you were to build a custom monk and you were to make an elf as your racial choice or your heritage choice, elves have a base movement of 6. So you could potentially have a movement 8 hero, which is insane. Like that's like double the speed of most other models in the game. So as I was saying, the monk's mobility is kind of like diffused throughout all of their abilities. And then there's magical items you can get, like the winged sandals or the boots of swiftness, that can further increase your movement once per game. So you can have just a ludicrously quick monk that's, ignoring terrain and other models. It's really fun if you build it that way. Alternatively, if you take reach range on your monk fists, then it's incredibly good also because it increases the number of squares you could potentially attack by 4. And one of the main benefits of reach is that you can attack a model from outside of their range to attack you back. So if they only have melee range, which is every square touching the square you're in, and you're attacking them from one square beyond that, they can't even hit you back. So they're both incredibly good choices, and it just comes down to how you like to play. At level 6, the monk can take flowing attacks or iron fists. Again, they're both really good choices. Flowing attacks lets the monk parry without gaining the disarmed status effect. So this means they can infinitely parry. It's really good, especially if you take arrow catching as well. You can just pretty much any attack that's not attacking you from like the rear arc where you can't see it coming. You're just blocking everything. Which again, if you ever watch Fist of the North Star, feels pretty appropriate, right? Like that was kind of like the vibe we were going for. Iron Fists gives the monk the armor piercing keyword on their weapons. So this one applies no matter what, if they're with monk fists or if they have a staff. And armor piercing lets you automatically convert the black explosion result on the action dice to a crit without using advantage. So this helps them to bypass armor by letting them activate more crits. And what that does is it replaces a damage die with a raw die, which ignores armor and cannot be blocked or parried typically. Again, both really good choices, and it just depends on how you want to play. Finally, at level 8, you can either take Acrobatic Charge or Scorpion Strikes, which I already covered, but basically lets you charge while engaged or increases the damage of your Fist of Fury attack. So playing Kechiwayo, the monk from the Hero Expansion box, when we were designing him, we had a lot of fun with it because like the obvious choice would have had him come from the Shin sub-faction in the game, which is like a Pan-Asian / fantasy themed area of Chael. And that's where Kijo comes from, the barbarian, who's like an Oni style barbarian. But we decided we wanted to do something a little different to put a fun spin on it because there's tons of like Shaolin monk style models on the market that you could use to make your own custom hero if you chose. So we decided to have the monk in the game come from Mutombo, which is the same area as Amara, the warlord from the core box, which is, we took kind of a mix of like African history, predominantly West Africa, a little bit of Northern and Sub-Saharan African history, mixed in with a healthy dose of fantasy, obviously. And we thought it would be cool to have like a monk that comes from like the savannah. And that was the core idea, which we thought was super fun and unique for Kechiwayo. And from their culture, they call being a monk their Caracol's dance. And we thought it would be cool to add some spice and give some character to Kechiwayo, to have him be a physical savant. So the path of the monk is usually basically impossible for most people. It's too demanding and difficult, but for him, it was easy. And so he answered the call to come on this adventure because he wanted to test himself, because he's afraid that on deep down, he may not have what it takes when he's truly challenged, because everything has been relatively easy for him. So he wants to come and try and make a positive difference, fight the good fight, but also to see if he really has what it takes to be a monk, to test himself. So we thought it was kind of a cool mix of elements to make him feel unique and not kind of like a cookie cutter monk. Although if anybody does want to do a Shaolin style monk, that's totally cool. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But one of our design goals with Bloodthrone was to make the named characters feel unique and to take like an archetype and put a cool spin on it. So that's him from a mechanics perspective. He's designed as kind of a classic monk, meaning he doesn't wear armor, he doesn't use weapons, he just uses his body. It's very introspective, meditative, wise, despite how young he is. And from a rules perspective, he's pretty well balanced, but he's oriented slightly more towards offense than defense. He has a very good accuracy of 4, so he's rarely going to miss. That's going to help land all of those attacks. He also has power 3. 4 is the max, so he's throwing a lot of dice when he attacks. His DPS potential is extremely high, and he's going to be very accurate. So defensively, he has a solid evasion of 5. It's not exceptional, but it's kind of in the middle. it's good enough that where he will get missed, but it's not up in like, once you get up towards 10 is when you're like really hard to hit. So he's kind of like right there in the middle. He has a solid fortitude and will of 3. Again, not great, not bad. So his defense is like it's in the middle, but his offense is very high. And then of course he has his parries, which are going to be critical to surviving the counter attack when he gets stuck into combat. He doesn't wear any armor, but he does have 21 hit points, which is high. So he can definitely take a couple punches before he goes down. And then again, you're going to be really counting on those parries to keep him stuck in. Although ideally, he's not going to be in a position where he's fighting something that's going to be able to take him out. You want to be patient and tactical in the way you play Kechiwayo, like in play testing, very similarly to the Rogue and the Warlock. We found that playtesters either loved or hated playing these, and the ones that loved it played them correctly, and the ones that didn't would just run straight into combat and then get overwhelmed. So the key to playing him correctly is to find a good angle of attack. Oftentimes this means on the first turn you're just moving, just going up a flank or hiding somewhere and waiting for the game to develop, and then committing when you're in a position where you can go attack into the backfield. And if you can get Kechiwayo into the backfield, he will devastate everybody. So if you play correctly, it'll be like Kechiwayo will be like your MVP, and if you don't, you'll find yourself picking him up, putting him in the model cemetery pretty quickly. As a human, like Grey Wolf, the Ranger from the core box, Kechiwayo has the Destiny Heritage skill. So again, when you're building a hero, your heritage influences your starting stats, and then it gives you your heritage skill. It's like a racial ability. And Destiny lets you, once per game, reactively let you reroll 1 die in your action dice pool. So it's really, really good. It's not as flashy as some of the other heritage abilities like, breathing fire or whatever, but it's just really good, and it's always good. Since you use it reactively, you can do it after you fail a roll, or if you just need to land an extra one of his attacks or something like that. So it's a really, really good heritage skill. And while it's not, like I said, it's not as flashy as some of the others, it's one that you're going to be using all the time. So like I said, the key to playing him correctly is to be patient. And there's certain buffs that the monk loves. Invisibility is amazing from the Arcane Trickster. That's like an incredibly useful buff to put on the monk. Protection of Faith from the Priest is another great one because it bumps him up, his evasion up to 7 or even more. And then Stone Skin from the Transmuter is another really good buff. It lets you ignore a hit. So any of those kind of defensive buffs to put on the monk is really, really useful to help give him that little bit of protection that he needs to get into position to then go just absolutely obliterate spellcasters, support heroes, monsters, etc. When you're playing against Kechiwayo, you kind of know what he's going to be doing because of the way that the character's built. They're going to be going after your more vulnerable characters. So plan for that. That's easier said than done, of course. So often what you'll do in this kind of a matchup, usually the solution is to hit him with ranged attacks. But if the monk has arrow catching, that's not going to be as reliable because they're going to be blocking whatever you throw at them. Often you'll send a speedy character to assassinate another speedy character. But the thing you want to be careful about is if you go head to head against the monk, because they do have the ability to block, to parry so much, oftentimes it won't do the trick. Because usually when two mobility strikers attack each other, it's whoever attacks first wins. And in this case, that's not always the way it goes down. So you need to be mindful in trying to attack him from the back where he can't parry. Or send a summon after him to just tie him up for a couple turns. That works really well. Anything that can reduce their mobility also is extremely good. So any kind of a debuff that will make them slower, or if you can reduce the monk's accuracy with blind, it makes them really struggle to do anything. So those are the ways you're going to want to try and counter them. And then, of course, the best thing to do is, if you can, is stick a tanky character on the monk, because the monk really struggles to hurt them, and then have a dispel or deny ability to prevent them from using acrobatic to get out of combat. And that'll be with your inquisitor or your strategist will be the ones that can do that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed learning about the monk, and I hope you're excited to get the game. I will be updating, like I said, every week with updates on where we're at as we get ready to ship it over. And next week, we're going to talk about the Artificer, which is one of the most powerful skill classes in Bloodthrone and was a playtester favorite. Got chosen almost every single time. You know, when you've got a guy with all kinds of gadgets and clockwork minions and he's got a gun, you know, blunderbuss, it's pretty hard not to enjoy playing it.